The cameras were already rolling when the night began to tilt. It was supposed to be one of those warm, crowd-pleasing evenings on late-night TV, the kind producers bank on when ratings need a boost. The studio was awash in amber light, the jazz band easing into their closing riff as Jimmy Kimmel stepped into his spotlight, the familiar curve of his grin inviting the audience to relax. The crowd leaned forward in their seats, ready for an easy laugh, ready to adore whoever walked out next. Tonight, Jimmy announced, his tone already infused with mischief, we have a very special guest. The man who made mumbling an art form. Rocky himself? Sylvester Stallone. The applause hit like a wave, booming through the rafters. The cameras panned to the wings, and there he was. Stallone stepped out with that unmistakable presence, shoulders squared, jaw set, but his eyes soft as he swept them across the crowd. A sharp black blazer hugged his frame, the deep maroon shirt beneath catching the light. It wasn't just clothing, it was armor, tailored and deliberate. He took his seat beside Jimmy, nodding politely, his voice carrying the gravel of decades. It's good to be here. Jimmy leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Good to have you, Sly. I mean, I was told you'd be bringing wisdom, experience, a few unintelligible syllables, and maybe a protein shake. The audience chuckled on cue. Stallone let out a small laugh, but his eyes lingered on Jimmy a moment too long, narrowing slightly, like he'd just been handed the first round in a fight he hadn't agreed to. Well, I left the protein shake backstage, Stallone replied evenly. Didn't want to outshine your green juice. A ripple of laughter. Jimmy smirked, sensing a comeback, but maybe missing the fact that Stallone's voice hadn't warmed. Touché, Jimmy said. So, another action flick? Or did you finally decide to make something with plot? There it was, the second jab. Subtle to some, cheap to others. Stallone kept his expression still. It's a story about redemption. A veteran confronting the ghosts of his past. Something that speaks to real-world pain. Deep, Jimmy replied with mock awe. And here I thought it was just another reason to flex those biceps on screen. The crowd tittered again, but the tone in the room shifted, almost imperceptibly. Stallone's voice dropped into that slow, deliberate rhythm that made you want to lean in. Sometimes pain needs muscle. Not to show off, but to carry the weight. The air cooled. You could feel it. Jimmy, sensing a change, leaned back with a smirk. Wow, that's poetic. Did Rambo teach you that, or was it Rocky? Stallone didn't miss a beat. Funny. I always thought comedy should punch up, not down. That landed. The audience murmured, a few sharp laughs breaking through. Jimmy blinked, caught off guard for half a second before masking it. Just having fun, he said. Don't want to get body slammed on live TV. Don't worry, Stallone said. I only hit when it's scripted. The crowd erupted, not just laughing, but sensing the edge sharpening. Jimmy tried to steer it back. Let's go back. The first Rocky. You wrote it in 3 days, right? Did you just run out of crayons? The laughter this time was hesitant. There was something in the question, a careless flick that cut deeper than it seemed. Stallone paused. His silence filled the room. I wrote it, he said finally, with everything I had. While sleeping in a bus terminal. Trying to sell my dog, so I could eat. So yeah, crayons weren't really the priority. Silence. Then, a single clap. Then another. Until the applause spread, awkward but sincere. Jimmy shifted in his seat. You know, Jimmy, Stallone continued, sometimes you crack jokes, sometimes you crack dignity. Be careful which one you're breaking tonight. The room was no longer neutral ground. The crowd's laughter had turned into something else, a current flowing toward Stallone. Jimmy noticed. And it rattled him. Wow, tough crowd, Jimmy said, smiling at the cameras. Maybe you should do stand-up. That comeback was almost intelligible. And you, Stallone said without blinking, should try sincerity sometime. Might shock your audience. The "oh" from the crowd was immediate and loud. Jimmy's jaw tightened. He tried to chuckle, but the fight was on. Let's be honest, Jimmy said. You've made more sequels than Hollywood has original ideas. Ever think of just letting it go? Stallone crossed his legs slowly, deliberate as a man loading a punch. I keep telling stories people want to hear. Maybe that's the part that bothers you. Jimmy chuckled, but it was thinner now. Or maybe it's that you keep playing the same guy with a new haircut. Better than being a new haircut with the same jokes. The audience roared, a sound that felt less like entertainment and more like sides being chosen. Jimmy leaned forward. Okay, but seriously, don't you worry people only see you as a punchline? Stallone's gaze was unwavering. Only when hosts like you try to write the jokes. Let me remind you, Rocky wasn't just a film. It was hope. For people who had none. The applause this time wasn't polite, it was a surge. Jimmy tried to laugh it off, but it came out tight. You're a millionaire now. Don't you think it's a bit rich talking about struggle? Struggle doesn't expire with a paycheck, Stallone said, his voice suddenly cold steel. It leaves scars. And it teaches you to recognize when someone's using you for their own punchline. That line landed like a hook to the ribs. Jimmy faltered. In that moment, anyone watching, in the studio, on their couches, even the thousands who'd catch the clip online later, could feel that this was no longer late-night fluff. It was a duel. Not for laughs. For respect. And as the first commercial break loomed, Stallone's eyes didn't leave Jimmy's. The battle line was drawn, and there was no going back. If you're watching this and you want more raw, unfiltered stories the networks don't want you to see, the moments when celebrities drop the script and show you who they really are, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss what happens next. Because tonight, this is only the beginning. The break was supposed to cool the air. It didn't. Behind the desk, Jimmy shuffled his cue cards with the speed of someone pretending to be busy. He sipped water, eyes flicking to his producer, who gave a silent, unreadable nod. Across the stage, Stallone sat motionless, staring straight ahead, his hands folded neatly on his knee. He wasn't fidgeting. He wasn't glancing around. It was the stillness of a man who had seen storms before and decided this one wasn't going to move him. In the control room above, a director's voice crackled through headsets. All right, we're live in 5, and let's try to get them laughing again. We're losing the warmth. But warmth wasn't in the cards. The lights snapped back on, the band played them in, and Jimmy slid into his polished grin as if nothing had happened. We're back with the one and only Sylvester Stallone, the man, the myth, what is it now? 80-something-year-old action figure? The audience chuckled, but it was uneasy, like a laugh track running a second too late. Stallone didn't even glance toward Jimmy. Better to be molded in stone, he said, than made of plastic. Applause, loud, sharper now. Jimmy caught it. He could feel it, the crowd wasn't his anymore. Well, I have to say, Jimmy tried, leaning in as if to reclaim ground, your fans are loyal. Almost, aggressively so. Like they think you're still that scrappy underdog from Philly. I am, Stallone said simply. I just wear better shoes now. Jimmy's smile tightened. But come on, Sly. Haven't we moved past the underdog thing? Isn't it time to hang up the gloves, literally and metaphorically? The pause was long enough for the air to thicken. You ever tell a soldier to hang up his boots because the war makes you uncomfortable? The crowd reacted, not laughter, but a murmur, the sound of people registering that this was more than banter now. Jimmy shifted in his seat. I don't think making Rocky IX qualifies as war. It does, Stallone said, when you're fighting cynicism, apathy, and the belief that people like me can't still inspire. The applause surged. Jimmy heard it as a verdict. So what you're saying, Jimmy shot back, is it's not ego, it's mission. No, Stallone said, his tone calm but unshakable. It's responsibility. To remind people you don't stop because the world tells you to. You stop when you decide you're done. Jimmy forced a laugh. Spoken like a man trying to sell box office tickets. And then Stallone's voice dropped, low and precise. You keep trying to turn this into a punchline. Maybe because deep down, you're afraid someone might take me seriously. The crowd roared, louder than at any joke so far. Jimmy leaned back, but his eyes gave him away. He was rattled. You want to know what scares me, Sly? It's that people think your on-screen persona is who you are. That Rocky is real. Rocky is real, Stallone said without hesitation. Not just because I wrote him. But because millions saw themselves in him. He's a mirror, Jimmy. Something you clearly avoid looking into. For a moment, the studio didn't feel like a TV set anymore. It felt like a stage where something unscripted and irreversible was unfolding. Back in the control room, the director whispered into the producer's ear, if this keeps up, we've got viral gold. Let them go. Jimmy forced a grin, but his voice was a touch sharper. So, what's next? A line of anti-aging supplements? Maybe a reality show? Keeping up with the comebacks? The audience chuckled nervously. Stallone didn't. You sit in that chair and poke fun like it's armor. But at some point, the jokes stop being clever and start becoming noise. Jimmy shrugged. It's just TV, man. Maybe that's the problem, Stallone said. You treat everything like a punchline. Even the people who came here with a story worth telling. For the first time, Jimmy's smirk faltered. And then Stallone stood. It wasn't sudden or explosive, it was slow, deliberate, like the final move in a chess game. The crowd's heads followed him, their applause starting before they even realized they were clapping. I've taken enough, he said. And I've given enough. To this industry. To this audience. To the spirit of what real storytelling is about. Jimmy stood too, trying to save the frame. Where are you going? We're not done. I am, Stallone replied. The applause grew. Not the raucous cheer of a joke landing, but the deep, rolling kind that comes when people decide which side they're on. Jimmy tried to laugh it off. Don't worry, folks. Next week, we'll have someone with a sense of humor. Stallone paused at the edge of the stage. He looked back, eyes sweeping over the crowd. Next week, try having someone with a soul. The place erupted. Backstage, the shift was immediate. Crew members glanced at each other, a few breaking into applause as Stallone walked past. A young intern mouthed the words, "Thank you." Camera operators followed him down the corridor, catching the way his jaw stayed locked but his shoulders eased, just slightly, as though the weight of holding back had lifted. In the green room, his publicist was on the phone already, her voice urgent but smiling. "Yeah, we have the clip." "No, it's better than that. It's history." Outside, Twitter was catching fire. In the time it took him to reach the exit, hashtags were already climbing. Hashtag Stallone unscripted. Hashtag respect the legend. In the distance, the band played Jimmy out, the notes bright but hollow. Somewhere between the stage and the street, Stallone knew this wasn't over. Because walking out was one thing. The real fight was about to begin. By the time Stallone's car pulled away from the studio, the world was already watching. The driver's radio murmured with breaking news bulletins, the kind reserved for scandals, resignations, or viral gold. On Twitter, clips of the interview had been cut into bite-sized bursts of fire, Stallone leaning forward, Stallone's voice cutting through the laughter, Stallone standing. Each one captioned, memed, and shared with the velocity of a cultural moment people didn't want to miss. In the back seat, Stallone scrolled. Headlines bloomed in real time. Sylvester Stallone destroys Jimmy Kimmel live. Rocky goes rogue. When a legend walks off. A text came through from an old friend, a fellow actor. You didn't just win that one. You made every one of us who's been on that couch want to stand up too. At a red light, the driver glanced in the mirror. They're calling it the Stallone strike. Stallone didn't smile. He was thinking about the way the crowd's applause had sounded, not like entertainment, but recognition. The kind that couldn't be faked. By morning, the story had spilled out of entertainment pages and into mainstream news. On one network, a panel of media pundits debated whether Stallone had been too sensitive or whether Kimmel had crossed a line. Another network replayed the clip on a loop while their anchor called it one of the most raw moments ever aired on late-night TV. On Instagram, actors, athletes, and even retired fighters posted their own takes. One MMA champion wrote, "That wasn't an interview. That was a sparring match." And Stallone didn't need gloves. But not everyone was in Stallone's corner. A late-night writer tweeted, "If guests can't take a joke, maybe they shouldn't sit in the chair." Within minutes, his replies were flooded with counterarguments, most pointing out that Stallone had taken jokes for decades, just not ones meant to strip away dignity. And then came the invitations. Morning shows wanted him to clarify his walk-off. Podcasts wanted him to tell the story in his own words. Producers from rival talk shows sent feelers to his agent. The incident wasn't a stumble, it was leverage. Still, Stallone stayed silent. 3 days later, silence broke. He was backstage at a charity gala in Beverly Hills, dressed in a crisp tux, preparing to present an award to a young filmmaker whose work on veterans issues he'd championed. Just before he stepped out, his publicist slipped him her phone. "It's Jimmy," she said. "He wants to meet. Tonight." Stallone's eyebrows barely moved. "Here? No. A restaurant in West Hollywood. Private room. Says it's off the record." For a moment, he said nothing. Then he nodded. Hours later, Stallone walked into the dim back corner of a quiet restaurant, the kind where the lighting hides more than it reveals. Jimmy was already there, in a suit without the cameras, without the desk, without the armor. "Thanks for coming," Jimmy began. Stallone sat. No handshake. "Why am I here?" Jimmy shifted in his seat. "Because I think maybe? I went too far." Stallone didn't respond. He let the pause stretch until Jimmy spoke again. "I push. It's what I do. The show, it's built on finding the line and crossing it. But maybe I didn't realize, you weren't playing the same game." Stallone's voice was quiet but edged. "It's not a game, Jimmy. Not when the stories we tell are the only thing some people have left to believe in." Jimmy looked down. "So, what now? You hate me forever?" "I don't hate you," Stallone said. "But I won't forget it. And you shouldn't either." There was a long silence. The clink of glasses from another table, the muffled hum of the city outside. Jimmy leaned back. "You know, the clip's bigger than either of us now. It's everywhere. You've become," he hesitated, "untouchable." Stallone met his eyes. "No one's untouchable. But some people know when to stand up. And some people just keep sitting." Jimmy nodded slowly. "Guess we know which is which." Stallone rose, buttoned his jacket, and without another word, walked out into the night. The next morning, a photo surfaced, grainy, taken from across the street, of Stallone leaving the restaurant alone. No caption. No context. Just that unmistakable silhouette. By noon, the hashtags were back. Hashtag Stand Like Stallone. Hashtag Soul Over Script. People weren't just sharing the late-night clip anymore. They were quoting it, applying it to politics, sports, even everyday life. It wasn't about Stallone versus Kimmel anymore. It was about knowing when enough was enough. And somewhere in the noise, in the endless scroll of takes and counter-takes, one moment stood alone, that quiet walk from the stage, not as a star, not as a character, but as a man who decided the story he wanted to tell was bigger than the script he'd been handed. Because sometimes the most powerful punch is the one you don't throw. If you want more true and dramatized stories that reveal what really happens when the cameras roll, and when they stop, subscribe now. The next one might just change how you see your favorite stars forever.